Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carly Stevens and this is Carly Stevens Books for all things writing, publishing, and indie author life. Now, you've probably heard of the term purple prose, but in case you haven't, I'm going to give you some definitions. This video is all about purple prose and whether it is as bad as people say. So according to the Google definition that pops up, purple prose is, quote, prose that is too elaborate or ornate. Wikipedia says the purple prose is characterized by the excessive use of adjectives, adverbs, and metaphors. Writers.com says that purple prose is elaborate, ornate writing whose style draws attention to itself, gets in the way, and ultimately does not benefit readers. Now, you probably noticed that all three of those definitions were negative, either on a small or large scale. Everybody says that purple prose is too ornate, that it's too elaborate, that it gets in the way. Everybody agrees that it is elaborate, ornate, and descriptive. Others go on to say that it is overtly just bad to read. Okay, so why then do some really well-regarded books use purple prose? Let me give you some examples. So Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien uses a lot of purple prose in its descriptions. There is a long time spent in description. There's a lot of high-level words and metaphors and multi-clausal sentences. I don't know if that's quite the way to put it, but sentences with a lot of clauses, a lot of phrases, multiple parts to them. Another famous book that uses purple prose is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I'm actually doing a whole chapter by chapter analysis and summary of The Picture of Dorian Gray over on my other channel, English Nerd. So if you've been interested in reading this dark academia classic, then now might be the time to start. I walk you through all kinds of interesting things about this book. Now, you may say both of those books are kind of old. That's just not how people write anymore. There is some truth to that. I want to be clear before I continue on to say that I think writing should be clear. I think being understood, understandable is extremely important in any type of writing. And it's true that general reading levels of the population of the world have gone down. So many people read at like a 4th grade level in terms of vocabulary and things like that. I read a lot of books that could technically be characterized in that category, and I love them. There is nothing wrong with a book that has simpler vocabulary, shorter sentences, faster pace, shorter descriptions, all of that. However, I don't think that ornate and elaborate equals not understandable for certain genres. So let's go back to what good writing is. Like, what does good writing mean? It's not just a fast-paced, easy-to-read book. That can be the case, but that's only one type of good writing. So good writing in general is when the style supports the content for a worthwhile purpose. So basically the way that something is written supports what is being written, that content, that substance, you know, whether it be the story or whatever, for a worthwhile purpose. I add worthwhile just because there are a few exceptions. You know, if there is a website, for example, giving how-to step-by-step instructions for people to do terrible things to themselves, there's a reason that there's a ban on that. That is not a worthwhile purpose. In fact, it is the opposite, even if the how-to manual is very clear, right? So the style matches the substance, but you have to have that worthwhile purpose too. When I say worthwhile purpose, some people hear this implied there has to be a moral message behind it. I don't think that's the case. I think a worthwhile purpose can just be entertainment. You think about somebody who is going through a really hard time in their lives and they need an escape, something that's going to just be so vivid that they can escape into and be entertained for a while, and that is also a worthwhile purpose. So let's get back to purple prose. Think about What is the purpose of your writing? If you like to do elaborate descriptions, if you like more vocabulary, I've taught high school level creative writing classes and I've asked, what is that weird particular thing that you love that you would put on your id list? I have a video about id lists if you don't know what that means. They're a great brainstorming activity. But I've had students say, I love big words. I love these more ornate, beautiful descriptions. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but nothing is everybody's cup of tea. So if that's yours, if you love purple prose, ask yourself, what is the purpose of the book that I'm writing? What is the genre of the book that I'm writing? Am I writing a page-turning thriller that's meant to suck people in really easily so they're reading really fast? Then purple prose is probably not the best choice of style to support that content. Instead, shorter sentences and shorter chapters and things like that are going to be more of a match for what your purpose is, which is entertaining, page turning, that kind of thing. However, if your purpose is to create an immersive place where people can contemplate the boundaries of beauty and youth, like the picture of Dorian Gray, then purple prose might actually be a great stylistic tool to use throughout your story. Let me give you an example from the picture of Dorian Gray, since I'm talking about it so much, so you can hear what this is like and why it works in a book like this. The studio was filled with the rich odor of roses, and when the light summer wind stirred amidst the trees of the garden, there came through the open door the heavy scent of the lilac, or the more delicate perfume of the pink flowering thorn. All right, that is the first sentence of the first chapter of The Picture of Dorian Gray. So it's setting you up for a tone of this opulent, luxurious beauty, these long sentences where you can really sink your teeth into them, and you can tell this is not a book that is meant to be sped through. This is a book that's meant to be savored with all your senses and that kind of thing. I mentioned that Lord of the Rings also has some purple prose. When I was looking up some examples, because Dorian Gray came to mind and a few others, but I wanted to expand a bit, I found one from Kindlepreneur, which is actually a great resource for you indie authors out there. I'll put the link down below to that website. But there's an article in Kindlepreneur about purple prose, the origins of it, the reasons that it's viewed as a bad thing generally in today's writing climate, and exceptions, why and how you can actually use purple prose in particular genres for particular purposes. So the example that Dave Chesson, the one who owns Kindlepreneur, put on here was from The Lord of the Rings. It's about the fall of Sauron at the end. From all his policies and webs of fear and treachery, from all his stratagems and wars, his mind shook free, and throughout his realm a tremor ran. His slaves quailed, and his armies halted, and his captains, suddenly steerless, bereft of will, wavered and despaired, for they were forgotten. Okay, now there is a method to the madness here with Tolkien, and why he uses this long, ornate sentence with this old-timey language. He was going for a legend or mythological feeling to his epic fantasy, and so he wanted it to be reminiscent of something like Beowulf. He wanted to give it gravitas that low fantasy simply does not have, nor should it. That's not part of the purpose. Part of the purpose here is to feel that sense of nobility and, the stakes of that right versus wrong battle. So some fantasy can use purple prose to great effect. Some classic novels can use it. And then things like dark academia and historical can use it as well sometimes. So I do have some purple prose in Laertes. The feedback that I've gotten is that readers' favorite parts are generally those where I spend more time describing the battlements apartment where the boys live, and I really dig into those descriptions. The more purple prose sections are some of the favorites in the story. So again, it depends on what kind of story you're writing. A few things to consider, to keep in mind before you go, great, I have the green light, I can write something as ornate and intense as I would like. Yes and no. So no matter how ornate or descriptive your writing gets, it should never be impenetrable or not understandable to the reader. Now, you're assuming a reader that does have a higher vocabulary and maybe even a higher education level, or reading level, certainly, and that's okay. But make sure that you are actually writing to enhance the meaning of what you're saying, right? Style matching content, and not making it harder to understand because you're not doing it super well. So once again, some things to consider. Number one, what genre are you writing in? Certain ones work well for this, others are not as advisable. Number two, think about the pace that you want. A slower pace does not mean a badly paced book. It can actually mean a really well-paced, slow book. But do think, what is the pace that I want? If you want something that is breakneck, if you want something that's really fast-paced, purple prose is not going to be your friend. If you want to really relish in a slow-paced book that still doesn't pause forever to describe things, but moves along while enjoying the moment in that purple prose way, then yeah, consider, is a slow pace what you're going for? If so, great. Purple prose could be right for you. Next thing to consider is audience expectations and desires. Like I said before, you can't make everybody happy. You can't do something that will please everyone. However, audience expectations and what the audience wants should be taken into consideration for your books, for your genre, for the type of book that you are writing. If you're writing a rom-com, then a lot of your audience is not going to appreciate pausing for long stretches of time to indulge in this purple prose. There are exceptions to everything, but I'm saying this is generally going to go against that audience expectation unless you've set up something otherwise with your own books personally. So think, what would somebody reading a thriller expect? What would somebody reading this historical book expect? And what would they really want? Do they want to enjoy this with that purple prose, with those metaphor-heavy sentences? If so, great. And this one's quite important, especially if you are a less experienced writer. There's nothing wrong with that. You can always grow. I am growing. I know that I have some weak spots, but that's one of the exciting things about being a writer, right? So I'm not saying this to shame anybody, but consider your experience using long sentences and a big vocabulary. There is an art to it. You don't want to sound just like a thesaurus that can get really awkward really fast.
What was this sentence originally?
Oh, they are warm, nice people with big hearts.
And that became, they are humid, prepossessing Homo sapiens with full-sized aortic pumps.
So, do you read books with long sentences, big vocabulary, beautiful descriptions? If not, there's no law against practicing, trying something out. I do it all the time. But do be aware that there is a way to do this that's really going to resonate with people, and there's a way to do this that's going to come across as a little bit amateurish, which obviously is not what you want. So how can you tell if you've nailed it? Then ask for feedback. Ask specific questions about the descriptions and about the language. Do people feel like the descriptions go on too long? Do they feel like they're skimming? Was there any part that they didn't understand? Was there something that was hard to read or get through? So ask those pointed questions about particular chapters or sections of your story. And hopefully you'll get some good feedback from that. This I loved, this was a little clunky. Maybe simplify that or rework it. So what's the takeaway from all of this? In general, I'm a big proponent of learning the rules. However, I'm a bit of a rebel with them. So learn what the rules are, why the rules are there. Purple prose is seen as a negative largely because of current audience expectations, reader level. You don't want something to be not understandable. So figure out the rule, the reason why it's there, and by doing that, you can figure out how and when to break the rules. A good writer is able to do that. Figure out how and when it's actually going to benefit them to go against the grain and embrace the purple prose. So hopefully this was helpful for those of you out there who enjoy that style of writing. It is not evil. Google is wrong. And so are some of these writing sites that say avoid this at all costs. There's a way to do it well. And if you practice, if you're careful, if you consider those things I mentioned, then you'll be in a good spot. All right, good luck. And I guess I'll see you next time. Don't forget to subscribe. Head over to my website, carly-stevens.com, for some resources for writers. I'll put that link down in the box below. All right, I'll see you next time. Bye.